You touched a little bit about the standardized tests, but tell us what the research has shown about the standardized tests, the ramifications, and the actual measurement of these tests.
Well, standardized tests like the SAT have a really bad seed that should have disqualified them from the beginning. And the bad seed is eugenics. Now let's go back to the first IQ test. It was developed in France. France made available public K through 8 education. It was the first country in the world to do that. It did that in the 1890s. And quickly, French educators discovered that about a quarter of the French students were falling behind. They weren't able to keep up with the curriculum. So a maverick psychologist named Alfred Binet and one of his grad students, Theodore Simon, developed a diagnostic test to try to figure out how young kids were falling behind. And it was seen as kind of a diagnostic test so that you could uncover why and maybe help them that way. Not once did Binet, the founder of the IQ test, ever think that a test once given would be predictive of a person's capabilities for the rest of their lives. That unfortunate error was made by an American, Louis Terman, at Stanford, who in 1916 created the Stanford-Binet IQ test. And Louis Terman thought he had discovered something magical, predictive power, something by which you could order society and create tracks for people. And this would be humane and kind to once test people, and then forever they would have to live on the reputation of their test. Terman tested this theory in a longitudinal study. I think it's called the Stanford Longitudinal Study, something like that, that measured whether these early IQ stars did in fact have great successful lives. And they didn't, just marginally better on average. They had almost the same skew as people who were average or above average. Then what happened? And all of these people believed in eugenics. You know, people from Northern European countries were superior. It was just built into the test. All of them did. It's a scandal about that era of science in the United States. Well, a guy named Carl Brigham out of Princeton in 1926 adapted the IQ test, and it became the Scholastic Aptitude Test. And Brigham was part of the eugenics movement. But Brigham, shortly before he died, had a profound change of heart. And he said in 1934, shortly before he died, that he believed we, the test creators, had committed a grave sin. He called it a sin. And that all this predicts is what he said is what a kid has been exposed to, not their native intelligence. So the SAT test might have died a death then, tainted by eugenics, but it was rescued not by eugenicists, it was rescued by a couple of FDR-era liberal reformers, James Conant, the incoming president of Harvard, and one of his deans. Conant was not from the aristocratic class. He was sort of the first president of Harvard not from the aristocratic class. And it bothered him on a fundamental level that in the midst of the Great Depression of the 30s, when people were standing in soup lines and there was 25% unemployment, that the old money rich, who were largely untainted by the stock market crash, or less damaged anyway, the old money rich and their kids were coming to Harvard and they were not turning up for class. They would live in Boston, they would go to debutante balls, and then they would hire tutors to push their sorry behinds over the finish line at test time. That's how they got through Harvard, and he was outraged at that. And he saw the SAT as a meritocratic weapon against the aristocracy. So that gave the SAT sounder footing, and it's just developed momentum since. All the Ivy League schools had quotas against Jews and other minorities up through the 1950s. And then it was the SAT that helped break those quotas. And then more recently, the correlation of how well these young tech moguls, how well they did on their SAT, led to this belief that that's where the wealth is being created by these academically, testably verified superstars. And so that trickled back into the whole system, and now it's just become this expensive, dangerous obsession that, as I say, ignores all the gifts that lie latent or will emerge later. And that's what we should be doing. We should be the educational system should offer the most paths of discovery for people to discover what their truest gifts and passions are.